Hey, what's up, folks? Addy here in Atlanta, Georgia with Amber Connor, the security chair for Buckhead Council of Neighborhoods. And Buckhead's in the news again, unfortunately again, for a murder. And it actually happened in the woman's house. How have people been responding to that, Amber? And what that event, what does it bring to mind to you as the security chair for Buckhead?
Well, it brings to mind many things. So the bigger issue that we've been dealing with is when you show up to try to complain about, hey, we're seeing a lot of crime over in this area. So crime will move from zone to zone, and for some reason, for the last 2 to 3 years, it has been very steady in Buckhead, non-stop.
Zone 2, right?
Yes, that's Zone 2. Yeah. And since it's been steady in Buckhead, the Buckhead citizens have been saying, hey, we want to split apart from the city. And the bigger issue is that small percentage of an area pays a large portion of the taxes. So if you're the mayor of the city, or if you're an elected official, that's the last thing you want to hear, because you actually need them to be part of the city. So then, it seemed to the residents there, and I kept hearing it over and over, even though I'm on the west side, was they're not listening, they don't care, they just want our money, and they don't care how we're being treated. They don't care that, we're paying, upwards of $15,000 to $20,000 to $30,000 a year just in property tax alone. Wow. And after we pay that, we might have to deal with potholes all the way from one area to another, just driving, or people trying to rob kids at the bus station or at their bus stop, not going to the mall, which would be right around the corner that they grew up going to.
Is that Lennox? Is that your
That's about? Lennox, Phipps, okay. The shops of Buckhead. So you would just have people being carjacked. There was car larcenies. There was aggravated assaults. There were people showing up in just restaurant areas and just kind of harassing the public. Oh. and actually asking for money, asking them, or just telling them, you don't care. People would spit on you. There were water boys who, as you were driving through an intersection, would jump on your car if you had a really nice car, demand money from you, and then if you open the window, would reach in and try to steal your wallet, or throw bottled waters, or try to break your windows.
That's crazy. It's like Mexico or something.
Yeah, and
water boys.
Yeah, and so when they first brought that to the city and complained, they just looked at it like you're just a bunch of snobs. But here's the issue that's missing. There are areas in which people pay a lot of money to live in. And there's people in the middle class and in lower class that when they want to go somewhere with their family and they've saved up all year, or they're going on a special occasion, they want to go to that side of town and go to a really nice restaurant and feel really good, or take their family somewhere. They might live on the south side of the city or west side of the city, but they want to dress up. They want to go to a restaurant and they want to feel good. But now, for some reason, our leadership over the years have decided that's not acceptable because that means elitist. No, it doesn't. It's actually a draw to your city. It also allows people who splurge every now and then to go. And then it's also good for business. It's good for people to know, if I want something nice, or I want to buy something top shelf, this is where I go and I can feel safe there. And for some reason, they felt like that had a race element to it. But what they didn't understand is, even in the Black community, there are specific clubs, especially blues clubs, jazz clubs. You can't come in sweats. You've got to come in your very nice shoes, your pinstripe suit, your fedora. You better come in looking sharp. Your pocket handkerchief better be stiff, and you better be ready to spend money at the bar and to treat the ladies well. And there is no grinding and being half dressed and bent over. It's about sophistication. And this happens in all of America, in every race.
Right.
And so when you've got a political climate where they're making everything about race, they're missing the importance of a dress code the importance of having a good posture, because what they're teaching their youth is you don't need to worry about a resume. You don't need to worry about having etiquette. You don't need to worry about sitting at a table and explaining to someone who you want to work for why you're fit for the job. You're being taught to go in, make demands, say you can wear whatever you want and never get a job, and then suffer by working minimum wage and wondering why the world hates you. So it's very ugly. It's an ugly deceit that's like a chess game that's purposely done to affect children to never be able to exceed, to fulfill what it is that they're saying in their ear every day. Everybody hates you, nobody likes you. And so we've been pushing back against, there's nothing wrong with etiquette. You know, you don't push it on everybody, and there's times to have it and there's times to just be relaxed, you know, play basketball, hang out with your friends. But, you know, we've just dealt with this for so long.
As part of a kind of cultural thing?
Well, it's pushed. So it's not that it just naturally became culture.
You mean the disrespect is pushed, or the
entitlement?
Or...
the music. Like, you'll have tons and tons of lyrical geniuses, right? And then you'll have this guy who pops out of nowhere. No one's really heard of him. We'll ask all the kids around where we live, who's this guy? I don't know. He just popped on the scene. They're telling us he's the best guy. And meanwhile, all these guys who have great lyrics, great dancers, wonderful guys, get back to the community, literally, you know, are respectful, kind, and talented. They don't get any attention. But the guy who's, you know, running around with guns and...
You're talking about hip-hop
I'm
artists
talking,
now?
I'm talking about even in pop, like in a lot of things. Yeah. It's just, let us reward you so you can keep the citizenry and you can keep your youth down and make them stupider, is what it seems like. And then when us as adults try to, you know, push back against it, they're using our own youth to turn around and yell at us and acting like we're prudes or we're weird, when they don't even know these people don't like you. They're actually setting you up for you to never be successful. And they want you to have a lackluster culture, a very diminished self-confidence, and not to teach you to be your best self. They want to bring out the cultural rot in you in all arenas, in all class levels, and in all colors. And
we saw unfortunately, Takeoff was murdered in Houston, but a thug, I think, just had another hearing today, a young thug here in Atlanta. But there was this, going back to the murder, I think she was 77 years old, and she was stabbed to death in her house in Buckhead, which is very similar to a man...
Right in her garage.
It was in her garage. Yes. A man who got carjacked and murdered a month or so ago, if you recall that one too.
Yes.
That was via gunshot. But I guess there was a couple, like he had just almost gotten apprehended right before that because he had stole some liquor. Is that correct?
Well, he was told to leave a liquor store because he was acting out. He's cuckoo. I mean, he was told to leave a Publix because he was screaming at people. He has outbursts. People around that area thought he was homeless because he would just be talking to himself, ranting and raving, acting out. And come to find out, his mother actually worked at the Starbucks across the street from where Ellen Bull's body was found. And she had complained about there was video of them fighting and getting into it. So there's been a constant like dropping of the ball, because you know, no city really has your rehabilitation centers, your addiction centers, your homeless centers, your mental health facilities. They don't have those things right now. And so they just grab them, put them in jail, give them a signature bond, throw them back out on the street. And so these are people that are incapable of getting it together, and they just go right back in the toxic environment. And so instead of calling the police, it's all like, if you call and you tell 911, hey, this is what's going on, they might transfer you to 311 so PAD can show up, who will come in, and they're like the, you know, we're here to help you group. But half the time they're scared because unless there's an officer with them, they're unarmed. Yeah. People get violent. They flip out of the blue. And so when they feel unsafe, they don't actually address the situation. And some people tested this. They went to a grocery store. There was a guy like running around, stripping, screaming, scaring everybody. So they called 911. They're transferred to 311. And they said PAD's on their way. So they went into shop, get their groceries. They come back out. As soon as they come back out after getting their groceries, they see the PAD van there. And then they call again because the guy is still running around the parking lot. And they were told, no, the case has been handled. Because they didn't assume, I suppose. PAD turned it in like they actually handled it. Their The woman, I think she got $3 million to handle, and be over this whole thing, and they're failing miserably, just like the people tasked with dealing with our homeless issue. They're failing miserably. But if you say anything, they'll dox you, they'll attack you, because they don't want to lose their money. They don't want to lose what they're getting, and so they're all they spend time doing is convincing everybody what they're doing is correct, and they leave kerosene and fuel for all the homeless people that are actually in the wood line behind Cheshire Bridge, and on a constant basis our firemen are asked to go put out fires that are near homes and houses, because they go and hand out all this stuff to people. They give them kerosene.
The PAD people do?
Yes. They give them all these things rather than getting them to a homeless shelter.
Right.
They just let them sit out there.
Right.
Rather than rehabilitate. The whole issue was, we're going to go and address this issue to get them off the streets, to find a facility for them, to rehome them, to get them acclimated back into society. They just go and throw stuff at them and make a bunch of junk. Everything is just laying around.
Kind of throwing money at the problem.
Yes, and that's all they do.
Yeah.
And then they say, we handled it. Meanwhile, people who want law and order, they're suffering because their cars are broken into. A lot of these homeless people, they were let out of jail way before they were supposed to be out. They don't have any family. And so they might be in with the homeless camp, but they're hurting people that are homeless. They're being violent, and then they're going off to attack and then escaping into the woods where the homeless people are.
Do you think this, going back to the murders, is that, who's mostly responsible? Is that the DA? Is that Fonnie Willis? Or is that the police
it's
chief?
The judges.
Or is it both? It's the judges?
It's the judges. Okay. So the DA, what they do is anytime, their job is, if someone is arrested, they're supposed to let the court know why they're dangerous. So they're not there to be lenient or to talk about this, but that's the defense. So if they don't have an attorney is provided. So the court will provide that attorney for them, their defense attorney. Some of them are really, really good defense attorneys. And then if you go up against, a judge that legislates from the bench, rather than looking at, if you just committed an aggravated assault and you are a felon who has a firearm, that's one of the 7 deadlies. You're not actually supposed to get a slap on the wrist, but you actually have judges that are in magistrate court that aren't supposed to give bonds to felons, but because a lot of cities, because they're backed up after COVID, their superior court judges actually allowed a contingency where the magistrates could give bond or make a declaration on their first appearance hearing, where usually magistrates are left out of that when it comes to the more severe felonies.
Usually a magistrate doesn't have that power.
Right.
Okay.
And so they allow that now because they're so behind. And then you've got a lot of these magistrates. You have our main magistrate, she's elected, but she hires a group, and they're hired, they're not elected. So they don't care if the citizens get upset, because they can't.
Some names. Do you have some names of these judges?
Not on me. And they switch a lot.
There you go.
And so that's the bigger issue. So when one is found to let someone out of jail for 50 cents,
right,
or for $5, which is what's happening, then they get a slap on there. You can't do that, and then they're kind of moved,
right,
and then they might rotate back in, or they'll say, oh, they're going to be suspended for 2 weeks. But what they don't say is, well, he only works 3 days a week and every other week. So the week that he's going to be suspended, he's only actually going to be suspended for 2 days if you lay it out. And that's not even actually a real suspension, because he's moving from doing stuff in Fulton County to DeKalb County or Gwinnett County, and they kind of move around because they're kind of sub, and when they're needed and when they're not needed. So there's all these workarounds. So the DAs, they're constantly contacting, or the assistant DAs are contacting the citizenry saying, we've got court watch, we want you to show up. If you know someone who's attacked and they're going to court, go with them. Speak on behalf of the neighborhood. Bring in your neighborhood association and say, this person has done this and this. It's, what they've done is scary. We don't, because what they're doing, of the criminals that are doing this, all their family comes in and says, my baby would never do this. There's no crime here, or, they didn't start it, or they've had issues. And then you've got a bunch of advocates that are on the PAD side saying, well, we'll do a diversion center. And then it's not even one that's been researched well, or it's an after school program, or if it's something where they're supposed to go and work once or twice a week, that's supposed to be something that actually changes them, but it doesn't. It exacerbates the problem. And then the person who comes in, they're sitting there all alone, And so they're trying to inform people, you got to come and you've got to support the victims. And so now they've really worked hard at getting a victim advocate. So someone who's there for the victim, to sit with the victim, so that the other people there don't intimidate them. So they're trying all these different things, but it's our judges. They're legislating from the bench.
Okay, wow. And how I know you can't speak for the other members of the council or the residents of Buckhead, but
Yes.
What have the reactions been like with yet another murder? I mentioned the one, the man that was, I think he didn't even live there. I think he was like a landscaper or something. He was just working on somebody's house. And he was doing construction work, and he was going to be working at their front door. He arrived at 6 a.m. Yeah, really early.
And he was at his truck, and he was getting robbed. And actually, one of my good friends, she contacted me that morning because her neighbor was driving their child to school, and their child saw the dead body and said, "Mom." And so then they pulled over, and then the mom,
the girl saw it.
And she freaked out, and then the mom went to look. They called the police, and then they actually called the people who they were supposed to be at their door. Well, then you had like 3 elderly couples that lived around there, that one set of them that everyone usually goes to their house, they found bullet casings at their front door. Now they're afraid to leave their house. And so you have people who've lived in Buckhead their whole life, right? And they're afraid as an elderly couple to go from their front door to their car, right? Or they can pull, they're afraid. And so this is what you've got going on. And then you've got people around the city minimizing it or joking about it. And that's not anything to joke about. You know, and I think the biggest issue is the city hid from Buckhead for very many years how bad crime was on the other side of town. Nobody talked about it.
Outside the zone too, you mean?
Yes.
Okay.
Nobody would talk about it. And in fact, you know, Buckhead, they're notorious for working a lot and then putting their kids in private school. And like one of the family members don't get home till 5 or 6 or 7. And, you know, they have their maid or they have people tending to the things, tutors for the kids, after school sports, but both parents are working. And, you know, it's a very high pressure job. So they're not actually wondering, I wonder what's going on the south side and why there's this large strip of land. You know, if anything, they've heard, oh, it's a great investment over here. They're going to build condos. You might want to put in an investment. Okay, if it sounds good, okay, great. But nobody in the city was coming and saying, your taxes, they would say your taxes are going to be reallocated to this school area that needs help, you know, or this or this. But then there was no return on investment. They weren't seeing anything. And then the poor communities were looking at Buckhead like, you know, you're not giving to us. But the middleman collecting and then not divvying it out properly was the one exacerbating the division.
The city?
Yeah. So there would be some city officials that knew they were derelict in how they actually appropriated the money and actually had all sides of town working together and understanding each other's needs, that instead of admitting to their failure, the best way to do it was to make the poorer community, you know, make fun of the wealthier community when they saw issues. Well, we've always lived with that. You know, you got to get used to it. That's what we've had to live with. Now it's your turn, right? But then on the other side, they're like, you keep raising our taxes and it's supposed to help these areas. And when we, like, not only do we have potholes, but these areas, what are you doing? So now we've worked really hard to get all those parts of the city together so that they understand that this is a shell game and this has to do with poor leadership. And it's not everyone in leadership. It's little pockets of somebody like whoever's in charge of the homeless, right? They're allocated money. They don't spend it appropriately. And most of their time is spent attacking people who question why we still, like, why isn't there being anything effective helping the homeless? So you have people holding on to their job by spending most of their time monitoring who's saying they're not doing a good job rather than just doing a good job.
Are you talking about Mayor Dickens, or who are you talking about?
No. So,
or what do you think of the mayor?
Okay, so Mayor Dickens is in a predicament. So he is what you would call classy. So he likes sophistication, and he likes being a parent, and he wants his kids to grow up to be smart. And he wants them to be a good citizen. And he does not like, you know, the violence or the cultural rot or the